Hey, what's going on? This is Ryan Nolting here, talking Jeff Beck. Jeff Beck, rest in peace, died on the 10th of January 2023 after a brief illness with bacterial meningitis. It was a shock to everybody in the music world. If you watch my top 50 guitar players of all time, he was incredibly high on my list. I think he was number two. He was a master. He was an innovator. He was a trendsetter, and he did things nobody else did with the guitar. We're going to do a brief history and the outsiders. You know, a guy came up to the office the other day and said, I know Jeff Beck died, but what did Jeff Beck even do? What did Jeff Beck play? What song would I know that Jeff Beck played? Well, when I thought about that, I realized, everybody's heard the name. He's kind of synonymous with Clapton and Jimmy Page as being a member of the Yardbirds and being a 60s guitar player from England. Let's talk about Jeff Beck. He, as a child in London, born in 1944, he hears Les Paul and Mary Ford do High the Moon, which is a famous Les Paul who, of course, invented, along with Gibson, the Les Paul guitar. He was an artist. He created the concept of multi-tracking and how High the Moon had Les Paul playing over himself. He asked his mom, what is this music? And she said, oh, that's a guy that's doing tricks with music and multi-tracking and so forth. And she said, and he loved that idea. He loved that you can create music and do tricks with a guitar. He sees the movie Girl Can't Help It with James Manfield, which has Gene Vincent and the Blue Caps in it. And that music, Gene Vincent's music, transforms him. His sister says, I know this other geek who loves guitar. Let me give you his number. And he goes over to this guy's house when he's 12, and that geek is Jimmy Page. And they become friends. And Jimmy's got some of this. They both have homemade guitars that they've made themselves. Jimmy's got a record collection with Ricky Nelson records, and James Burton's the famous guitar player in Ricky Nelson's band. Cliff Gallup and Gene Vincent again. They go to art school. Jeff Beck stays a couple years in art school before he's starting to do gigs, and he's in a band called the Tridents. Meanwhile, the whole British blues thing is happening. The Yardbirds have formed with Eric Clapton. The Yardbirds can't get a hit. So Clapton leaves, and in comes Jeff Beck. When Clapton heard Jeff Beck, he's like, I might need to retire. He's like, I can't do these things. And he's completely blown away by that music. Heart Full of Soul becomes a hit. If you listen to that song, in the studio, they had a sitar player that was ready to play sitar. And the guy couldn't get the timing right on the sitar. So Beck says, well, it's like this. And down, now, man, oh, no, now, 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 now. If you listen to that song, he ends up doing it on a guitar. Shapes of Things becomes another hit. Roger the Engineer is the best example of Jeff Beck with the Yardbirds. Listen to the song Jeff's Boogie off of that record. Bass player leaves. Jeff's old childhood friend, who's a session musician in London, Jimmy Page, joins on bass. Well, after a while, Jeff's getting losing his way with the band, and then for a 6-month period, Jimmy Page and Jeff Beck are both lead guitar players in this band, the Yardbirds. And it's some of the most influential music in rock history. What spurns Aerosmith with Whitfield and Joe Perry. The dual guitar thing in Thin Lizzy is all based kind of on the Yardbirds. They really, even in that 6 months, completely innovate rock guitar. Stereo lead guitar players. He decides to quit. Jimmy Page is going to take over the Yardbirds and ultimately form Led Zeppelin. Jeff Beck quits the Yardbirds while on tour in America. He isn't sure what to do. Back then in England, you could use the entire UK and treat that like a tour. Similar to, think about it like the America's East Coast, where you could go to Philly, you could go to DC, you could go to New York, Boston, up into the New England area. The same thing with the UK. You can treat that as a touring vessel, going up and down the motorway. There's a club called the Cromwellian Club, and that's where a lot of these guys, even if it's 2 o'clock in the morning, can go get a drink, talk to other musicians. Well, Beck's out of a band. He goes there thinking he might be able to find somebody, and he's the only one there drinking his beer. But there is one guy in the corner, and that person happens to be Rod Stewart. Rod Stewart's out of a band. They sit, talk. Ron Wood's name gets brought up, and next thing you know, you have the Jeff Beck group with Ron Wood, who's in the Rolling Stones, currently on guitar, Ron Wood on bass, Rod Stewart on lead vocals, Jeff Beck on guitar, and Mickey Waller on drums, and they put out this seminal album, Truth. Truth comes out 6 months before Led Zeppelin 1. This album has Shapes of Things Again on it, has Rock My Plimsoll, has Beck's Bolero. This changes rock music really going forward. Their next album in '69 is Beckola. Okay. Again, just all shook up. Rice Pudding. Listen to the song Rice Pudding sometime. Just unbelievable. And by the way, on Truth, there's a version of You Shook Me. You Shook Me. I mean, Zeppelin ends up basically copying this album on their first record. Beck is involved in an accident. Prior to that, they are supposed to play Woodstock. Rod Stewart, Beck, and the Jeff Beck group are supposed to play Woodstock, and prior to that, Jeff Beck says, you know what, I'm done, and quits, leaving those guys stranded. Ron Wood and Rod Stewart go and join the Faces, and Beck's kind of out of a band. He's in an automobile accident. He decides to regroup with Cozy Powell and Max Middleton and Bob Tench on this awesome record. By the way, that's Jeff Beck, that's Cozy Powell. They look like brothers. Max Middleton, who ends up becoming a big part of the next few years. This is an amazing, amazing album. Got the Feeling, Situation, Short Business. This period is a funky. It's different than the real rough, primitive rock sounds of the previous two albums. They then come out with what some people call the Orange record, but it's called the Jeff Beck Group record. Again, Max Middleton. Again, Cozy Powell. Ice Cream Cakes. Listen to Ice Cream Cakes. It's incredible. Meanwhile, Jeff Beck's heard this new music from Miles Davis, the album Jack Johnson. That guitar player on Jack Johnson is actually an old teacher of Jimmy Page's name, John McLaughlin. This blows his mind. This is the beginning of jazz fusion. And Jeff Beck absolutely wants a part of that. Prior to that, though, this album, Beck, Bogart, and a Piece, comes out. This is a power trio. Tim Bogart singing, Carmen Peace sings as well. Look at that back. Bogart on bass, Carmine on drums. This is a monster album. But you know what this album kind of lacks? Is that great singer. He had that great singer with Rod Stewart. But again, going back to the John McLaughlin thing, and now John McLaughlin's formed a seminal jazz fusion band called Mahavishnu Orchestra. And we've talked a lot about on this channel. And by the way, subscribe to my channel, like this video. We've talked a lot about John McLaughlin and Mahavishnu Orchestra on this channel. And it seems to be coming back to him in that same vein. the George Martin produced Blow by Blow. Max Middleton again is on this record. This is just phenomenal. You Know What I Mean, She's a Woman, Constipated Duck, Scatterbrain. The album closes up with Freeway Jam, 'Cause We Ended as Lovers. 'Cause We Ended as Lovers is a Stevie Wonder song. It is so brilliant. During this time, Jeff Beck's worked on Talking Book with Stevie Wonder in the studio. In fact, while in the studio, Jeff Beck's playing drums, and Stevie says, "Wait a minute, keep doing that, keep playing that." And right then and there, Stevie Wonder writes Superstitious. Bounce, 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 bounce. It's all done in keyboards, but Jeff Beck is on drums. In fact, on this previous album we spoke of, Beck, Bogart, and Appice, they do a version of Superstitious, which is killer. After Blow by Blow, another amazing record, also produced partially by George Martin, is Wired. This is jazz fusion. This has Narada Michael Walden on drums. Jan Hammer writes Blue Wind and produces Blue Wind. Jan Hammer was in Mahavishnu Orchestra. This really takes, and look at these back pictures with that Les Paul. Excuse me, yeah, black Les Paul. Just an amazing record. Wired, man. Max Middleton on clavinet. Jan Hammer synthesizers. Come Dancing. Lead Boots. Sophia, Play With Me, Love Is Green, and Blue Wind. I mean, just incredible. Jan Hammer and Beck do a live album here from '77. That's just phenomenal. After another album in 1980 with Jan Hammer, Jeff Beck kind of takes a break. I mean, he's gone through these albums. These last three albums have all been instrumental records. You're moving into the 80s. Jeff Beck's got hobbies. He's a car nut. When he got his first significant check with the Yardbirds, he bought a '63 Corvette split window coupe. He works on guitars. He works on guitars and cars, and hot rod cars most of all. In 1985, though, he does come back with this record, Flash. This is an attempt at pop music. It's not a sellout by any means. He has Jimmy Hall on vocals. It's a good record, but it's not as good as what comes out in 1989 with Tony Hymas and Terry Bozzio on drums. Jeff's Guitar Shop. This is a monster album with Big Block on it. I really recommend this. This is another instrumental record, but it's updated from those 70s records. A tribute to Gene Vincent comes out in '93, Crazy Legs. This is amazing. It's rockabilly, right? It's Brian Setser's orchestra-esque type of music. If you like that 50s rockabilly thing, it's so good. As the 90s move on, Beck keeps putting records out. He's working with a lot of female artists. He's working with Jennifer Batten. He's working on this 2010 record, Emotion and Commotion, with Josh Stone and Imelda May. And he covers a Puccini song. He's getting into almost classical music. This is just such a beautiful album. And it's really an album that really brought me. I'd seen Beck in '95. I had seen him in 2001 and 2004. In fact, when I saw him in 2004, he jammed with Eric Clapton's band at the Cotton Bowl in Dallas. But when this record came out with Narada Michael Walden on drums, I saw them 3 times, and I really finally got what he was doing. And I'm not going to pretend like I know how to play like Jeff Beck, but he's now, after playing in the 60s and 70s with a guitar pick, he's now just using his fingers, and he's using the wham bar. As he hits a note, he uses his index finger where he can compress that note and almost make it sing. He doesn't really even need a singer, even though he is working with Josh Stone, but he hits a note and uses his finger, and it's really a style that's never been done before. Loud Hailer comes out in 2006. 16 with Carmen Vandenberg and Rosie Bones. This is an amazingly modern album. I recommend this album. You're not just a rock dinosaur. Same thing with the previous album. You're not just a rock dinosaur. You're still making music even up till 2022 when he does this album with Johnny Depp. Yes, Johnny Depp, the actor. This is an amazing record. It just came out. I haven't even had a chance to fully digest. This record's called 18. And by the way, Rhonda Smith is another woman that Jeff Beck has played with for years on bass. Again, if you want to jump into the world of Jeff Beck, I recommend starting here with Blow by Blow. I recommend starting here with Wired. You can't go wrong, again, with the first two Rod Stewart vocaled albums, Truth and Beck Ola. Rest in peace, Jeff. You were the best. I mean, his documentary, Still on the Run, has Jimmy Page, has Slash, has Eric Clapton, has David Gilmour, talking in reverence about this guy, basically saying he could do everything that we could do, but we can't do the things that he can do. And, he was never following trends. He was never trying to say, well, now it's the 80s, I need to do this, or now it's the 90s, or, he did what he wanted to do. And that's why he's an outsider. That's why the common person walking down the street knows who Jeff Beck is and thinks he needs to know who he is, but doesn't really even know a song. And I'm not here to say that there's anything wrong with that. But I am here to say, check out some of his stuff. Go to Spotify and just listen to the 10 most popular songs. Anyway, I, with a heavy heart, want to, wish his family the best. And Jeff, you were an inspiring person to everybody. And I have no business having even a guitar like this, but you were the man. Peace out. Subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching this whole video, and be good.